In early 2021, a official fan club for Kubo was released called KlubOutside. This is where fans pay either a monthly or a one-off yearly membership. Now, it was initially supposed to run for a year, but because it was so successful, it was expanded and it's currently in its third year. The most interesting thing about KlubOutside is that every week, Kubo answers a selection of questions from fans. On the channel, I haven't really made a dedicated video about these questions in the past, but during my Bleach Explained and character analysis videos, I have delved into some of the answers that Kubo has given us via this website. So Kubo did initially start off by answering about 5 questions a week, but as of recently he's been answering about 3 questions and they are usually made available at the start of every week for fans to look at. KlubOutside is nothing short of a goldmine, as we have over 500 questions that are being answered by Kubo himself. These questions really do vary in terms of their quality, but thankfully there are enough good questions that have been answered which reveal significant details about the Bleach lore, the backstory of some characters, as well as an explanation for some unanswered plot points or details that we didn't know that weren't included within the Bleach manga. In this video, I intend to sift through all of these 548 questions and to share with you some of the best questions that have been answered by Kubo. We'll be talking about details of Senjumaru's past before she was enlisted in the Zero Division. We'll also be discussing details about Gin Ichimaru's deadly Bankai, as well as the significance of Quilge Opie as a stern-ritter combat instructor, and even cool facts in regards to the Zanpakuto of the Arrancar and how it is created. There is no real limit to the scope of the questions that have been asked to Kubo, which means that this video is going to be very comprehensive as we're going to dive into multiple different topics and characters, and all of the questions that have been asked in relation to them. So yeah, you can expect a lot of Aizen questions, some questions about Hitsugaya, and not to forget a multitude of questions in relation to specific characters, Zanpakuto, their Bankais, and also some abilities like Yoruichi's cat transformation, which Kubo has in fact given us a proper explanation for. So you are definitely going to want to stick around until the end of this video, as I'll be revealing so much information which will be fuel for your theories and speculations about the lore of Bleach and how Kubo's official fan club has helped to answer some of the longest standing debates within the fandom. This video is perfect whether if you're a die-hard Bleach fan or a newcomer to the series, because I guarantee that you'll learn something that you didn't know about the series after having seen this video. So without further delay, here is my deep dive into all of the important questions that Kubo has answered on his official fan club KlubOutside. So let's kick things off by talking about a member of the Zero Division. So within the Bleach Can't For Your Own World light novels, it's revealed that Senjumaru was in fact the Shinigami who had created the Shinigami Shihakusho, and it was thanks to this invention that she was promoted into the Royal Guard. Some fans do question the canonicity of Can't For Your Own World, but thankfully via Kubo's official fan club, he confirms that all of the information within Can't For Your Own World is in fact true to his vision of the story. Now the Shinigami Shihakusho is more than just a garment. Within the first chapter of the manga, we learn that it completely transforms to white, and it becomes slightly altered in its appearance after a Shinigami loses all of their spiritual pressure. This had happened to Rukia when she had transferred all of her powers over to Ichigo. This had led me to believe that Senjumaru as well as Nimaya were some of the first Shinigami to have been promoted into the Zero Division, with Nimaya having invented the Zanpakuto and Senjumaru having invented the Shihakusho. However, details revealed by Kubo in question 548 about Senjumaru make me question the timeline of when Senjumaru had joined the Zero Division. Kubo reveals before Urahara had established the Shinigami's Research and Development Institute over 110 years ago, there existed an unofficial research group of the Soul Society. Now this group had included Mayuri and it was led by Senjumaru. This question helps to establish the long-standing interest in scientific research that the Shinigami have had. I mean, it was hard to believe that there wasn't a dedicated group before Urahara had established a Research and Development Institute within Squad 12, and this answer helps us to understand a bit more about Mayuri's backstory and the relationship between Mayuri and Senjumaru, and why there was some animosity between the two of them when Senjumaru had visited the world of the living immediately following the first invasion of the Quincy. This question does lead me to theorize that some of the research that the Shinigami may have been conducting within this unofficial group may have been dangerous to the Soul Society. Maybe with the creation of the Shinigami Research and Development Institute, scientific research may have been allowed to be conducted with the cooperation regeneration of the Central 46. In the past, this may not have been the case, which helps to explain why Mayuri had wounded up within Maggot's nest. Meanwhile, Senjumaru, who was the leader of this unofficial group of scientists, had ended up being promoted into the Zero Division. Now, what really makes me struggle with the timeline of where all of this fits in is that over 1,000 years ago, we know that the Shinigami were wearing Shihakusho, and Senjumaru wasn't present during the original war against the Quincy. Neither was Nimaya. So we know that the Shinigami were wielding Zanpakuto, and Nimaya had invented the Zanpakuto. So at this point, we know that Nimaya would have been at the Zero Division when the Quincy had originally attacked the Soul Society. Does this mean that Senjumaru over 1,000 years ago was also in the Zero Division? If this information is accurate, then it would imply that Mayuri is a lot older than we thought he was. He may even be from a generation of Shinigami that existed before Shunsui and Ukitake, because Senjumaru had become a member of the Zero Division before the creation of the original Gotei 13. Maybe Mayuri became the leader of this unofficial group of scientists after Senjumaru was promoted, and one of the first acts of the original Gotei 13 may have been to imprison Mayuri. He may have been sent to Maggot's nest not because of his sickening experiments, because as the captain of Squad 12 he has done some insane stuff which hasn't warranted him being imprisoned, namely his experimentation on Soken Ishida and the other Quincy. So we can theorize that Mayuri may have learnt some secret knowledge about the Royal Palace and the Soul King, namely information about the body parts of the Soul King, or even the nature of the Soul King himself, which also helps to explain why he speaks so casually with Yamamoto, like the head captain is his equal. Additionally, this adds further context to Mayuri's relationship to Urahara, because he is genuinely frustrated or even envious of Urahara's scientific prowess, because he is so much more younger than him, but he is a prodigy when it comes to scientific innovation, and in general has outclassed Mayuri in his own field several times in the story. And this is considering the fact that Urahara is maybe 1/5 of Mayuri's age, if it's true that Mayuri is as old as head captain Yamamoto, and is from that era from 1,000 years ago. The next fascinating question that Kubo has answered is question 545, and this question is in relation to Gin Ichimaru's Bankai Kamishini no Yari. Now, the ability of Gin's Bankai involves leaving a part of his Zanpakuto inside of an opponent, effectively poisoning them with this one piece of his sword. When Kamishini no Yari is activated, his sword expands at a lightning fast speed. The fragment of his sword which remains within the body of his opponent ends up being a potent poison. Now, this poison, as Kubo clarifies, is not just a mere extension of the blade, but it's a secretion of the sword that methodically destroys the victim's body cells. Now, interestingly, the piece that is left behind from Gin's Zanpakuto remains to be missing when Gin retracts his blade. So fans have been wondering whether if Gin's Zanpakuto would slowly break up and deteriorate over time the more times that he utilizes his Bankai, especially considering the information that we learn about a Bankai in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, where Mayuri reveals that a broken or damaged Bankai cannot be restored. So it's understandable to assume that Gin's Bankai may only have a limited amount of uses based upon the length of his blade. Now, Kubo explains that the fragment that is missing within Gin's blade does end up regenerating over time. This is similar to the regeneration process of a snake replenishing its venom. The restoration of this piece of Gin's Zanpakuto depends on the sword's condition as well as Gin's overall strength. It's no secret that Gin's poison from his Bankai is very potent, and it surpasses even the poison of Mayuri's Bankai. Upon activating his Bankai, his opponent has little to no chance of survival, with its ability to completely destroy all of the body's cells. So yeah, I love the fact that Kubo has finally explained that this piece from Gin's Zanpakuto is in fact a secretion of his Zanpakuto's poison, and it slowly regenerates, and it fits into the similarities that Kubo has written into the story comparing Gin to a snake. The Bleach Unmasked databook confirms these details about Kamishini no Yari, explaining that its hidden power is the dust that is hidden within the blade, which contains a deadly poison that breaks down and destroys cells. Next up, we have question 554, which Kubo had answered, which was in reference to Quilge's usage of Ranso Tengai, and why none of the other Sternritter had utilized this ability during the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. And it's because Quilge is in fact one of the older members of Yhwach's Quincy army, and because he is a combat instructor for the Sternritter, explaining that some of the current Sternritter were his students. Ranso Tengai is a high-level Quincy technique which allows the user to control their own body by using strings of reishi. Now, these strings are controlled by the brain, and it effectively allows the individual to control their disabled body parts, similar to a puppet that is controlled by wires or strings. Ranso Tengai is usually used following a severe injury, or if the Quincy becomes paralyzed, like how Uryu had been paralyzed by Mayuri's poison. It was confirmed that Ranso Tengai was created created in order to allow elderly Quincy to fight effectively. It's such a rare power that Mayuri hadn't encountered a Quincy who could use it prior to his battle against Uryu. And this is considering the fact that he had experimented upon 2,661 Quincy, so I guess it makes sense that the mentor or the combat instructor of the current generation of the Senrata is able to utilize such an old and advanced Quincy technique, a power that Soken Ishida was also aware of and had taught Uryu it at some point in time. This answer by Kubo helps to explain why Quilge had a different air about him in comparison to the rest of the Senrata. He was the only one amongst this new generation of Quincy who had used existing Quincy techniques which we had seen earlier in the story from Uryu. These of course were the traditional Quincy powers, very different to the innovations that the Senrata of this generation use. This also leads me to believe that Quilge Opie may have been involved in the original battle against the Gotei 13 over 1,000 years ago, and he would have survived the battle and thus retreated into the shadows with Yhwach, and thus helping Yhwach to pick up the pieces of his empire as they transitioned from the Empire of Light to the Invisible Empire. It's no doubt that Quilge took his role and responsibility very seriously, and he was a lot more mature in comparison to the other members of the Senrata, who frankly behaved like impulsive teenagers. Quilge had a level of discipline about him which really set him apart from the other Quincy. Now it leads us to wonder who amongst the Senrata were tutored by Quilge Opie himself. If I were to take some random guesses, then I definitely think that Gerard and Lil Barrow would be among some of the students of Quilge. Individuals like Basby and Hashwart had already gone through a lot of extensive training prior to joining the Senrata, and Hashwart had already become a captain of the Senrata within 3 years of joining Yhwach's army. I also think that it's highly likely that Askin would have been tutored by Quilge also. This does open up a lot of possibilities for Core 3 and 4 of the 1000-year Blood War arc anime, and for an extended 1000-year flashback of what happened following the original battle against the Gotei 13. How did Yhwach and the surviving Quincy escape into the shadows? What were the Quincy doing while Yhwach was sealed away awaiting to be restored? There's just this massive void of time where the Quincy were up to all sorts that we know nothing about, so the anime has a massive opportunity to capitalize upon this, and these small hints that Kubo is dropping within Club Outside are honestly just the tip of the iceberg, I think. So next up we have question 542. Kubo explains that Unohana has complete control over the size of her Zanpakuto's Shikai, as she is able to alter the size of Minazuki according to her will. This grants her an exceptional level of control and power over her abilities, because being able to control the size of one Zanpakuto is a rare skill. It demonstrates a deep and nuanced understanding between a Zanpakuto and its wielder. Through this answer that Kubo is given, it leads us to speculate whether if the other Shinigami have control over the size of their Zanpakuto manifestations. Like the giant baby that is formed when Mayuri activates his Bankai, is he able to control the size of this baby? Or the giant armored avatar that Komamura summons when he activates his Bankai Kokujo Tengen Myo, is he able to alter the size of this colossal creature? In question 529, Kubo reveals some insights about Urahara's candy shop. Kubo explains that Urahara had decided on opening a candy store as his business because it's easy for him to avoid suspicion considering the fact that he stores a lot of strange items. Another important reason is that he is able to open and close his store at more unconventional hours. It's details like this that really expand upon the world building and the lore of the series. We are aware that Karakura Town is under the jurisdiction of the 13th division of the Gotei 13, and it is considered as a concentrated spirit zone. It is a point within the human world that possesses the greatest concentration of spiritual beings, which helps to explain why Urahara had set up a store within this town in the first place. I mean, God knows if there are other exiled members of the Soul Society or other spiritual beings that reside within Karakura Town that we aren't aware of. I mean, it's for this reason that Urahara has set up a candy store as a cover in order to supply spiritual goods to all of these different beings. One notable example of someone visiting Karakura's shop occurs in chapter 428 during the Fullbring arc. It's when Ichigo's sister Karin visits the store and she purchases several anti-hollow products from Urahara, and Urahara lets her take them for free, stating that he doesn't want to charge her because he is in debt to Ichigo. Okay, so these were some of the more recent fascinating questions that Kubo has answered about Bleach on his fan club, but we have in fact over 500 questions to dive through. Again, there is a mixture of questions here of varying importance. A lot of them are really pointless, but there are some genuinely fascinating questions that are buried under some of the more pointless ones, and thankfully these do help to restore my faith in humanity. Seriously though, some fans are asking things like, what's the gender of Neanzol Weasel from question 518? For those of you who did want to know, Kubo does confirm that he is a male. Or consider question 517, which delves into why Orihime refers to Grimmjow just by his name without any suffix, unlike how she addresses Ukiura as Ukiura-kun. Apparently it's because Grimmjow wasn't in a good mood when she had first met him, but Kubo then says that this was also the case for when she had first met Ukiura. Okay, well, I think you get the point. These aren't some of the groundbreaking revelations that you all have clicked on this video for. I've searched through the backlog of all of the questions that Kubo has answered, and I've somewhat listed out all of the important answers that I'm confident that all of you will enjoy hearing about. So let's start by talking about Yoruichi's cat transformation. In question 331 asked on Kubo's fan club, he reveals that Yoruichi had initially developed the ability to transform into a cat just so that she could sneak around her family's mansion. Now some fans are saying that this contradicts question 465 which Kubo answers on the fan club, where he reveals that Yoruichi's ability to become a cat is in fact a quirk that is inherited from the Shihoin bloodline, as he reveals that some members of the Shihoin clan are born with the ability to transform into a specific type of animal. So just to confirm, not every single member who is born into the Shihoin clan has shapeshifting abilities. Take for example Yoruichi's younger brother who hasn't exhibited such an ability. It would be safe to assume that during her younger years she would have experimented with her shapeshifting abilities, and she would have settled on shapeshifting into a cat because it best aligns with her character. Also, Kubo revealing that her cat form was created in order to escape from the Shihoin family home is perfectly in line with her carefree attitude, her sense of freedom, as well as her not really taking the responsibilities of nobility seriously. So next up we have some questions that are related to Zanpakuto and Bankai. Question 171 that Kubo answers reveals that older Zanpakuto like Katen Kyokotsu tend to have longer Zanpakuto release commands than younger Zanpakuto like Sode no Shirayuki. In question 238, Kubo answers that if a Zanpakuto is inherited from a deceased Shinigami, which was the case for the Zanpakuto of Tozen as well as the Zanpakuto of Kenpachi Zaraki, then both its name and powers will either be overwritten by new abilities exhibited by the new wielder, or the Zanpakuto will become a mixture of the powers that it previously had along with new powers that begin to manifest with its new user. So when Tozen had inherited the blade of Kakyo after his friend had passed away, Kakyo's essence had remained within the Zanpakuto. By wielding Kakyo's Zanpakuto, he was keeping her alive in some way, shape or form. This adds another layer of depth to Tozen's decision to forsake his life as a Shinigami in order to holofy himself. By being holified, he in fact had given up the Zanpakuto of his old friend. Because of his pursuit for more power, he had forsaken the final part of Kakyo's soul, which had resided within a Zanpakuto. In those early days when Tozen had inherited her Zanpakuto, it must have been painful for him to see the remnants of her essence whenever he had utilized Suzumushi. In question 277, Kubo reveals that all Zanpakuto consist of two separate parts. This of course is the blade and the scabbard. Sayafushi and Zangetsu are the only two Zanpakuto without a scabbard. After Ichigo's Zanpakuto was reforged by Uetsu Nimaya, it had gained somewhat of a scabbard in the form of the shorter blade that Ichigo wields, and Ichigo combines both of these blades together in order to form his true Bankai. I do delve into way more detail about question 277 in a separate video where I explained what had happened to Ichigo's Bankai at the end of Bleach. This explains why both Sayafushi and Zangetsu don't have a scabbard, and how Zangetsu is given a scabbard once the Bankai form is activated. In question 350 that Kubo answers, he states that Shinigami that have achieved Bankai can activate their Shikai without saying their Zanpakuto's name, and it's even possible for Shinigami who haven't attained Bankai to activate their Shikai without saying the release command. This is of course if the Shinigami is skilled enough to do so. If a Shikai command isn't stated, then it may result in a Shikai not properly manifesting or not being activated at full power. This further emphasizes the importance of names within the Bleach universe. So similar to Kido spells, you can use a high level spell without an incantation, but it comes at the cost of the power of the spell. This is in line with Yumichika calling his Zanpakuto a false name. When he calls it Fuji Kujaku, the Zanpakuto sulks and it only activates a partial Shikai. So it makes sense that by not using a Shikai release command, then a partial Shikai will manifest. Within question 402, Kubo is asked that amongst the Gotei 13, there are so many Shinigami, so is it possible for two Shinigami to have the same Zanpakuto name? Or has there been such an instance where a Shinigami has had the same name of a Zanpakuto that had existed once in the past? Kubo clarifies that no two Shinigami can have the same Zanpakuto at the same time within any given era, but it is possible for a Zanpakuto to share a name with another Zanpakuto which had existed in the past. I think that it's amazing that Zanpakuto are able to reappear. As weapons, they are incredibly versatile versatile. From all of the answers that Kubo was given, we have learned that a Zanpakuto can be inherited by another Shinigami. They are sentient beings with their own personal interests and opinions, and their will can counter the will of the user, and they are able to manifest into a physical form if the Zanpakuto wielder is strong enough. And this revelation within question 402 from KlubOutside adds another layer of depth and nuance to the Zanpakuto. Question 472 helps to reveal why Engetsu and Zangetsu are similar. We learned that a Zanpakuto is able to share similarities between two Shinigami who have a blood connection. This of course is evidenced by the Zanpakuto of Isshin and Ichigo. They both have similar names with Zangetsu and Engetsu, and the two of them are also able to use Getsuga Tensho. Now while the question had posed the similarities between Isshin and Ichigo, Kubo does elaborate that Zanpakuto similarities are not exclusive to just a parent and their child, but similarities also exist between individuals who have any sort of blood connection. So you could think of similar Zanpakuto types or abilities appearing within the noble families. So the Getsuga Tensho ability may be one that is exclusive to the Shiba clan, similar to how the Kuchiki clan and the Shihoin clan will have their own respective Zanpakuto similarities and inherited abilities. This just leads me to wonder what on earth Kazui's Zanpakuto will be and what abilities will he manifest. Now adding to this, in question 387, Kubo is asked about Isshin's Getsuga Tensho and how it differs from Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho. How Isshin's Getsuga Tensho is a short-range technique that combines both flames and Reiatsu in its final slash. As you're seeing on screen, this was confirmed within episode 12 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime, as the attack is more horizontal in its manifestation and is performed with Isshin's right arm, and you can see that it's charged with fire and the color is a strong orange, thus confirming the differences between Isshin's short-range Getsuga Tensho versus Ichigo's long-range Getsuga Tensho. So continuing on, in question 117, Kubo answers that the reason why Zangetsu could not say his name aloud to Ichigo during their first encounter was because Ichibei had used his powers to ink out the real name of Old Man Zangetsu. There is every possibility that Old Man Zangetsu was trying to say that he was Yhwach, but Ichibei had made it so that nobody could even say Yhwach's name until the Quincy King had become unsealed in the future, thus allowing Yhwach's name to be said freely once again, without his name being distorted by the intervention of Ichibei's powers. So topping off all of these Zanpakuto related questions, next up we have some questions about Kinpachi Zanpakuto Nozarashi. Kubo reveals that Yachiru Kusajishi is the Bankai manifestation of Nozarashi, and the true Zanpakuto spirit of Nozarashi resembles an adult woman. This link between a younger version of a Zanpakuto spirit manifesting like how Yachiru is a younger version of Nozarashi is similar to how Tensei Zangetsu is a younger version of Zangetsu. In question 419, Kubo reveals that when Yachiru and Kinpachi had first met, during the flashback revealed in chapter 114, Yachiru touching Kinpachi's Zanpakuto upon him questioning where she had come from was Kubo's attempt at foreshadowing the true nature of Yachiru, with her replying that she had in fact come from Kinpachi's Zanpakuto. This is truly an incredibly subtle piece of foreshadowing, and it makes me wonder just how many more visual instances of foreshadowing are there within Bleach that none of us have picked up upon. So next up we have some Quincy related questions that Kubo has answered, and we're starting off with how Yhwach has prior knowledge of every single Quincy shrift ability before he bestows power upon them. Yhwach has the ability to see words as if they were engraved into the individual's body. Thus, he has the ability to find respective individuals based upon these embedded words, and he grants them existing shrift abilities from now deceased Quincy, who most likely had died during war. In question 301, Kubo is asked that the effects of the Quincy medallion and the Sanct Altar, which is used by Yhwach, are very similar, as the questioner asks if it's correct to assume that the Quincy medallion is an application of the Sanct Altar technique. Kubo confirms that this is correct. With Sanct Altar, Yhwach is able to steal power from the target in order to give to himself. Within question 339, Kubo confirms that Ichigo's Bankai was not able to be stolen by Quilge's medallion because it is already holofied, so Ichigo did not need to take a shadow infiltration pill in order to prevent his Bankai from being stolen by the Quincy and used by them. Question 525 is very interesting, as Kubo confirms the hand-to-hand combat and Blut Veen proficiency rankings for each of the Bambis. So in terms of hand-to-hand combat, the overall ranking goes as follows. Lil Toto is the strongest, followed by Meninas, Candice, Giselle, and Bambietta being the weakest amongst the Bambis. And when it comes to the overall ranking of the Bambis' Blut proficiency, Lil Toto is once again the strongest, followed by Giselle, Meninas, Bambietta, Bambietta, and this time Candice is the worst at Bloot proficiency. Question 525 was really enlightening, and it helps us to rank the strength of the Sternritter a bit better, as I had always assumed that Bambietta was among some of the strongest Sternritter, but according to Kubo's rankings, she isn't that strong at all, and among the Bambis, she is in fact the weakest, you could say. In question 185, Kubo reveals the relationship between Mask D, Masculine and James, as after Mask was defeated, Yhwach comments on how James has died, as the questioner asks Kubo whether if it's correct to assume that James is the real body, whereas Mask D, Masculine is just a fictitious form that he has invented. Kubo confirms that James is in fact the real Sternritter, while Mask is a figment of his imagination. It's pretty much his idea of an ideal hero. Question 475 reveals some key details about Gerard Valkyrie's Shrift ability, the Miracle. The questioner asks Kubo that when Gerard was cut in half by Kinpachi's Bankai, something similar to a Quincy cross had come flying out of his head. The questioner asks whether if it's correct to assume that this Quincy cross is the core of Gerard, and if this was destroyed then Gerard would have been pretty much defeated. Kubo confirms that if Kinpachi was capable of destroying this cross, then Gerard would in fact have been defeated. I guess the whole point of Gerard's character is that the opponent that he faces off against will not know about his weakness. At the onset of battle, it would be pretty easy to defeat Gerard. All you'd have to do is cut him in half and destroy his core. But because his opponent won't have knowledge of his weakness, it results in Gerard getting stronger and stronger, thus making it more difficult for Gerard's opponent to cut him clean in half and then destroy his core also. I mean, Gerard had gotten so strong at this point that it had taken the power of Bankai Kinpachi in order to cut him clean in half. And even then, the core of Gerard was unscathed, meaning that the strength of Bankai Kinpachi was unable to destroy it. So we're wrapping up the Quincy related questions with question 288, where Kubo is asked could it be that Giselle is an actual female, and Yumichika insinuating that she is in fact a biological male was just something to provoke her. Well, Kubo's answer to this finally puts it to rest, as he confirms that Giselle is in fact a biological male. It's time to talk about our favorite white-haired prodigy of the Shinigami, Toshiro Hitsugaya, as he has a number of questions that have been asked about him to Kubo. So question 69 is in reference to when Isshin was still a captain of the 10th division, and Rangiku was his lieutenant while Hitsugaya was the third seated officer. So this questioner asks why did Rangiku not advance to the position of captain after Isshin had left? Kubo reveals that this is because Hitsugaya was more suited for the position of captain, and also because he had already attained Bankai by this point. Kubo reveals an insane detail as he states that by the time that Hitsugaya had joined the Gote 13, he was already able to use Bankai. Question 120 confirms that both Hitsugaya and Rangiku noticed that Ichigo was Isshin's son, and they both were aware of their former captain within Karakura Town when they had visited the human world during the Arrancar arc. But for whatever reason, they had decided not to reunite with Isshin. Question 226 asks Kubo if the petals from Hitsugaya's Bankai Daiguden Hyorinmaru were to disappear before Hitsugaya had mastered his Bankai, what would happen to Hitsugaya? Kubo reveals instead of maturing Hitsugaya and transforming him into his adult state, he would end up undergoing an imperfect growth and he would damage himself in the process. We see the opposite of this during the 1000 Year Blood War arc, when the final petal disappears and Hitsugaya reveals that his Bankai has now reached full maturity. Next up, we have a couple of questions relating to the Arrancars, Hollows and Visords. So someone who is down really bad in question 73 had asked Kubo, between Rangiku, Orihime, Yoruichi, Haribel, Unohana, Isane, Neliel and Noel, who has the largest chest size? Kubo the Mad Lad reveals that he probably draws Neliel, visualizing her as the most well endowed out of all of the girls listed. Question 463 asks about the location of Neliel's hollow hole, as Kubo reveals that it's located within her heart. This may well be linked to Neliel's aspect of death, which is lamentation. Within question 346, Kubo is asked whether if it's possible for two hollows to conceive an offspring. Kubo confirms that yes, this is a possibility. This does make me wonder whether if some of the Vastal Lorde Arrancar were the offspring of other Vastal Lorde. Within the Bleach Unmasked databook, it is revealed that Ukiara was a member of a Hollow clan, and this clan had seemingly consisted of Vastal Lorde. This opens up the possibility of a whole new generation of powerful Hollows emerging. If more of the Vastal Lorde were to reproduce, this may well happen now that Haribel is the leader of Los Noches, and it seems like there is peace overall within Hueco Mundo. In question 410, Kubo is asked about Xylopodo and his his brother Ylfrith grants. He is asked whether if the two of them are twins. He confirms that they are in fact twins, and this adds to the information that we learn about the two of them from the manga, where it was confirmed that Ylfrith was in fact the older sibling of Xyloporo. Within question 535, Kubo reveals that when a hollow becomes an Arrancar, the part of their mask that breaks off becomes their Zanpakuto. In question 309, Kubo is asked if Grimmjow trains hard enough, would it be possible for him to unlock Segunda Etapa, or in other words, a second resurrection? Kubo responds by saying yes. This opens up the possibility for all of the other Arrancar to be able to achieve a second resurrection, provided that they train hard enough. Question 133 speaks about Tozen using holification and entering what would appear to be a resurrection later on when he transforms into that moth-like creature. The individual asks Kubo whether if Ichigo and the other Vizards are able to also achieve a resurrection while holified. Is it possible that they could use both Bankai and resurrection while they are holified? Kubo confirms that theoretically it is possible for them, that Vizards are able to achieve a resurrection like Tozen, and they'll be able to also use their holo masks along with their Bankai. In question 469, Kubo reveals after the 1000-year Blood War arc, the remaining Vizards who were in the world of the living were granted soul tickets in order to enter the Soul Society as they pleased, instead of having to use the Senkaimon and being guided between the realms with hell butterflies. Question 75 is about Chad's decision to become a boxer, which is revealed in the final chapter of the manga. The questioner asks Kubo that up until then, Chad had sworn that he was never going to use his fists to fight for himself, so why is it that he had become a boxer? They ask, did something happen that had made him change his mind, or is there a special reason behind him wanting to pursue the title of a boxing champion? Kubo says that nothing has changed, and Chad simply considers boxing as a martial arts sport, and he doesn't view it as something violent. Question 294, Kubo is asked when did Chad get his tattoo? Was it back when he was in Mexico, or perhaps while he was in his hometown of Okinawa? Kubo reveals that Chad got his tattoo back in Mexico when he was only 9 years old. So Kira was initially assigned to the 5th division under Aizen, but after it was discovered that he was talented with Kaido, he was transformed to the 4th division. And the questioner wanted to know how on earth did Kira go from the 4th division to the 3rd division under Gin. So it seems like Aizen was behind this. Question 158 asks Kubo, Aizen had stated that no one ever stood atop of the heavens before, and then he looks at Ukitake and continues, not you or I or the gods. The questioner asks whether if that you that he was referencing to Ukitake was supposed to imply that he knows about the relationship between Ukitake and the Soul King, meaning that he was aware that Mimihagi's presence was within Ukitake. Kubo confirms that yes, Aizen was aware that Mimihagi had resided within Ukitake. Question 471, Kubo reveals the reason behind why Aizen was wearing glasses. The questioner asks were Aizen's glasses just for show, as the questioner assumes that the reason that Aizen wore glasses was to make his face appear more gentle. But they want to know the real reason from Kubo, why was it that Aizen was wearing glasses? Kubo confirms that it was to make Aizen's face look softer and more gentle. Well, there you have it, these were all of the most important questions asked on Kubo's fan club. We delved into details about characters like Senjumaru, Gin Ichimaru, Neliel, Hitsugaya. We uncovered several details about Bankai, Zanpakuto, the nature of Quincy powers, and not to mention all of the new details that we learn about Hollows and the other races within Bleach. I really look forward to all of these questions every week that Kubo answers. The insights that Kubo gives into the lore and characters of Bleach helps to spark fresh discussions and theories amongst the fans, and it allows us to have a bit more of a deeper understanding of the series. As a lot of people have pointed out, KlubOutside is providing way more information about the Bleach world than the manga ever did, and this is because of the way that Kubo tells a story. He's not the type of author to spoon feed you or hold your hand through the events that are unfolding. This is why the answers that he has given have helped to piece together theories that fans have had for years. So while some of the answers that Kubo has given fans have assumed for years at this point, there are some that we had absolutely no idea about. I personally love all of the answers that he gives in relation to the abilities and the powers of the characters, as a lot of things are left open for interpretation, so it's nice to have some concrete answers from Kubo himself. If you want to stay up to date with all of the latest answers that Kubo provides, then I highly recommend subscribing to Simo Urahara's channel, and honestly I check out all of his videos every week whenever Kubo reveals some important information about the series that we didn't know about before, so definitely Definitely go and check out his channel, he has some amazing theories, and he does an amazing job of keeping us up to date with all of the Q&As on KlubOutside. But other than that, I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you think about the information that we have learned from the questions that Kubo has answered on KlubOutside? I look forward to reading all of your thoughts about these new pieces of Bleach information that we learn every week. And lastly, as always, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach video.
If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.